time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chad Erickson, and great to have you all with us on this Tuesday edition of the program. A program in which we will be joined by our friend Sam Yarnell later in the show for something to consider along with odds and ends. There's a ban in Major League Baseball because of betting on Major League Baseball. We'll tell you about that. We'll also get into the story of Miles Russell. 15 years old. He's going to play in a PGA Tour event later this month. That was announced on Monday. Robert Littal, Black Sports Online founder, will join us as well as he gets set to head off to the NBA Finals. We'll talk about those upcoming NBA Finals. We'll also get into it with him on the world of boxing. Is it over for Deontay Wilder? Should it be over for the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight? We'll also talk to him about this Caitlin Clark story, which is where we begin on this Tuesday. And I was enlisted, tasked with writing this column on Caitlin Clark, and it should be on msnbc.com by now. If it's not, it'll be up there shortly. And they asked me to write a piece, and I hesitated at first when they approached me about the idea of writing this piece, because columns need to be written in a very concise way these days. The days of 2,000-word essays, it's just not what MSNBC wants of me. They want something short, concise, 750 words, 900 words. And my fear in writing this column was that I couldn't get in everything that needed to be put into a very complex story. The Caitlin Clark story, the way it's being covered in the press, and the real-world impact within the WNBA is a very complex story. It is not, I don't think it's even meant for 900 words. I hope I did my best, and I hope it reads well and people enjoy it, but it's a difficult story to talk about in the confines of 900 words, which is why I like talk radio or even this format where I can explain myself a bit more. But depending on where you sit right now, just 11 games into Caitlin Clark's career, you either view her as this great white savior of a league that was previously fledgling, or she's the product of media overkill and she's overshadowing a collection of really talented rookies and young players coming into this league and seasoned veterans that laid the foundation for the very ground that she is walking on right now, the path that she is walking on right now. So we have to start there. And then you get into the way the WNBA has handled Caitlin Clark. I said it from day one. They were going to rue the day that they opted to put 36 of her 40 games on either Amazon Prime or Ion or CBS or ESPN, basically nationally platforming her above and beyond everybody else. I said before the season even started, that was going to be a mistake. And I think it is part of this overall conversation about some resentment. I don't think everybody resents her. I think some people get the bigger picture or understand the bigger picture better than others. But I also think there's something to be said for the person at the end of the WNBA bench who's not making even a livable wage versus watching Caitlin Clark make a $20 million shoe endorsement from Nike or whatever the hell it is. There are many complexities, and I think what we're seeing in the last 48 hours in this Caitlin Clark story, this is what happens when people that don't typically cover women's team sports, and by the way, that includes me, I'll point the finger at myself. And we're all learning on the fly. Or some of us are learning and others are just blowing through the learning and just saying whatever comes to their mind. Pat McAfee calling Caitlin Clark a white B word. And even if he was doing it in complimentary terms, and I saw it, and I know what he was trying to do, you simply cannot use that language to talk about women. Period. Full stop. And he did it. in what was essentially a planned segment. But that's another topic for another time. We know ESPN has made their bed. They're lying in it with him, as it would be. Or Stephen A. Smith and Monica McNutt going at it on First Take and arguing about whether or not Stephen A. Smith could have been covering the WNBA more 3 years ago, as opposed to the way he covers it now, and Stephen A. Smith getting all defensive and clutching his pearls because somebody dared to challenge him on his beloved show. It brings all of these things to the forefront. But what it calls to mind most for me is this. You have a men's sports media hierarchy that has covered almost entirely men's sports from the team perspective. I'm not talking about Simone Biles or Ronda Rousey or an individual athlete like Serena Williams. The team sports female dynamic has not been covered this intimately by the mainstream sports media. Only now is it. And it feels like, to me, they don't know how to cover it yet. They don't understand the dynamics of gender, race, sexual orientation, the financial dynamic, because they ain't getting paid what the men are getting paid. All you've had for all these years are men covering women's sports from the 30,000-foot view. And from up there, it all looks the same. It's just like men's sports. It's just, different gender playing the same sport. But it's not. There is a different dynamic in play. The way men interact with men isn't necessarily the same as the way women interact with women. And it's a different game. The WNBA is played below the rim. The NBA is played above. And because you have a WNBA that's played below the rim, it is going to be a much more physical league. This was a physical league before Caitlin Clark ever got there. It didn't just become a physical league when Caitlin Clark arrived and she's getting pushed around and nobody else is. There have been fights over the years of the WNBA. It is a physical game. It's a different game. And just as we normally would sometimes turn a cocked head towards a woman giving an opinion on men's sports, maybe we need to look at the men the same way when they talk about women's sports. We're coming back. All right, we're taking on the top stories of the day on Sports Wrap, and always happy to bring in our friend Robert Littal, founder of Black Sports Online. He's packing his bags, literally as I was getting ready to talk to him. He's packing his bags, getting ready to head off to Boston for Game 1 of the NBA Finals, which will begin on Thursday after this interminable wait for the start of the NBA Finals. We'll talk to him about that coming up in the next segment. But I want to get your thoughts. I just gave mine as it relates to this whole Caitlin Clark story. And for those who may not have seen it or missed it, or just to kind of update you, Robert, I think, and I wrote about this in a column that'll be up shortly if it's not already up for MSNBC.com. I think sort of the missed point here on this Caitlin Clark stuff is so much of what we do as men in sports media is geared towards men. When we talk about women's sports, we generally have always spoken about it from the 30,000-foot view. We're not intimately involved with a lot of the stories in women's sports, especially in women's team sports. I'm not talking about a Simone Biles trying to win gold medals and things like that and doing what she's done, or Ronda Rousey when she was dominating UFC for the time that she did. I'm talking about the team sport dynamic in something like women's basketball. And now you've got all these people, as Noah Dalzell pointed out yesterday from SB Nation, who covers the Celtics and the WNBA. You have all these people parachuting in to talk about the WNBA as if they can just parachute in and talk about it the same way you would talk about men's sports. And you have men talking about a sport largely that they don't cover and have never had an interest in until now. And I don't think they know how to talk about it, which is why you're getting the Pat McAfee screw-ups, why you're getting the Stephen A. Smith, Monica McNutt conversation that we saw on First Take on Monday. I just don't think a lot of men who cover sports for a living, I just don't think they know how to talk about it.
You know something? I'm going to disagree with you in this respect.
Okay.
Right? I don't think they know how to talk about men's sports. Okay, to be perfectly honest with you, I think the WNBA is getting the same treatment that we see from NBA analysts, we see from NFL analysts, we see from MLB analysts. And what I mean by that
but it's
is
not the same. That's the point.
Right. That's what I'm saying. In the era of the hot take, what's happening is that the WNBA, you have a subset of WNBA reporters that for years have been covering the WNBA, what I like to call covering it straight, the correct way, covering the basketball aspect, the players aspect about it, and just covering a sport like we used to cover, a sport 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now that they're popular, as you say, the hot takers have parachuted down. But they don't know how to talk about sports in a traditional way. They want drama. They want a soap opera. This is the Young and the Restless. This is the WWE. Oh, we got a young lady shoulder blocking Caitlin Clark. We can talk about that for 5 hours now because that's how they cover sports in general. And I say it's a frustration part, and I can understand it because I told a story of Mayweather and Pacquiao, how boxing reporters who had been covering boxing matches in bingo halls and small arenas and, doing all of the groundwork, only to see same thing. See the people like Stephen A. Smith parachute in, and all of a sudden they're the ones that are talking about boxing and not giving credit to the people that laid the foundation. So I disagree with you in the sense that I think the WNBA, I think it's eye-opening maybe to their longtime fans and their longtime media. It's eye-opening to see them being talked about in a way that's very similar to how people in media talk about other, sports. I mean, you literally see podcasters, Gilbert Arenas, Tracy McGrady. The last one I heard was, Steph Curry's, not a top 10, top 20 player. So it's ridiculous things that you hear from these former athletes and media people. I think now it's just carried over to the WNBA, and it's a shock to the system of people that have covered women's sports in a traditional way for a long period of time.
How much, and I appreciate having you on, because I think there's a lot of intersectionality that sort of comes into the conversation when it comes to the WNBA. And I'm interested to get your thoughts as it relates to how race plays a role in this, how we're talking about young black women in the context of the WNBA and the rough and tumble nature of it. And it is different because it's a below the rim game versus the NBA, which is above the rim and much more protective of its stars. The WNBA is played largely below the rim, and it's played in a much more physical manner because of that. And I've always viewed it as being a much more physical league, by and large. I'm not saying that men are tougher than women are tougher than men. I'm just saying the style in which it's played and what is allowed in the contact in which it is allowed. It's always been a rough game. It didn't just become rough when Caitlin Clark got there. So now you have people, again, parachuting in, seeing this physicality and being shocked by it. And as a result, sort of castigating a lot of young black women for the physicality of that game. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, two things. First off, through the history of our country, it's always been the good guys were white, the bad guys were, black. They were the good guys were the white hat. You have the angel's food cake, you have devil's food cake. You have the great white hype. You see, we've talked about it in boxing. We had it with Magic and Larry.
Sure.
Throughout the history of sports and the history of time, black and white has always triggered, a reaction, through society. That's no different right now with the WNBA. They have a white player, and this is no fault of her own because she can ball. She can play.
Absolutely.
We've seen it. It's not like she's, not talented, but they have a white player from smack dab middle of America, foreign nation, Iowa. And then you have, black athletes and black people in general. We got a little more swag.
Yeah.
We got a little more personality. That rubs sometimes people the wrong way. And that's a promotional tool. And let's be honest, people are using it for their various reasons.
Let's continue the conversation. We'll come back on the other side. A couple more things to wrap up on this. Then I want to get to the NBA Finals. We're continuing with Robert Littal, Black Sports Online. Don't go anywhere. We'll get into some boxing in 10 minutes. Is it the end for Deontay Wilder? I don't wonder after what we saw this weekend. And should it be the end for this Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight? I think that's a question a lot of people are asking right now. But it doesn't sound like it's going to be the end. In the meantime, we carry on conversation with Robert Littal, who joins us weekly on the show, Black Sports Online founder. We were talking about the WNBA, and I just want to kind of let you button up what you were saying in terms of sort of the way this story is being viewed. And that's what I think, and this is why I say, again, to kind of go back and forth on this point I made at the beginning of the last segment about these people that don't really know how to cover women's sports or women's team sports because they're parachuting in and they haven't been covering it for a while. You're talking about a sport now, you have issues involving race, you have issues involving gender, you have issues involving sexuality, because in the WNBA, unlike the NBA, you have openly gay players. You take all of that, throw it into a pot. You have the great white savior, as I pointed out in my column. Depending on who you are and how you view Caitlin Clark, it's either she's the great white savior of a fledgling league, or she is the overhyped media darling that is stealing the spotlight from other young stars and seasoned veterans.
Yeah, just talk about the physicality part.
Yeah.
I think one thing that people are missing about that is that they keep saying, well, the WNBA is physical, it's physical. But many people don't want to see that. Why do people like Caitlin Clark? To me, I don't think it's just because she's white, because they've had great white NCAA college basketball players. Connecticut has one every year. I think the reason a lot of people connected with Caitlin Clark is because she plays like Steph Curry. People love shootouts and they love logo threes. What don't you see in the WNBA? Yeah, you see a lot of, maybe people don't want to watch that. Maybe we don't want to watch, rough and tumble basketball. We want to watch free flowing basketball. The NBA figured that out a long time ago. That's the reason why this year people scored 130 points, a game, because they realized that's what people want to watch. But and just to sum it up, I think all this is a good thing. I know some of it is a little off the wall, and obviously there are people that take it too far. But the fact that First Take will spend 40 minutes on it, we will spend two segments on it. I will write 7 stories about it. I've never written 7 WNBA stories in a day in my life, but I did yesterday, and I have a couple of more today. So in the end, I think this is what they want. It's just how it is in 2024. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be all nice and tidy. It's going to be a little messy, but messy is what moves the needle.
Interesting to juxtapose the arrival of Victor Wembanyama and all the fanfare he came with and how his opening season went on a bad team as this vaunted star, and how Caitlin Clark is and how it's being
why?
handled.
I tell you why.
Okay.
In my honest opinion.
Sure.
Because the 12th man on an NBA team still makes $1 million, more or less, right?
Yeah, no, he does.
So when he sees Wimbyana coming in, he's like, "Hey, I can live pretty good with $1 million." The 12th person on the WNBA team is not making McDonald's manager money, and then they see Caitlin Clark with a $20 million contract. I think that's the reason why maybe there's not as much grace given to Caitlin Clark.
I think it's very fair, and again, that's why it is a different conversation from covering sports the way we do. You just made my point for me. See? You just made my point for me. All right. NBA Finals start on Thursday. You're going to be...
We're going to talk about the NBA. Nobody else is.
What do you see when you look at this matchup? I got to be honest. I think the Mavericks are going to win. I really do. And frankly, I think they're going to win in 6. I think the combination of Luka, Kyrie, Jason Kidd, who I will take any day of the week and twice on Sunday over Joe Mazzulla as a head coach. I think this thing's over in 6.
It seems inevitable, right? Even though the Celtics, won all the games and, have all the home court, something just seems inevitable about Luka and Kyrie. It just seems like if it was a scripted story, obviously that's the way it would go. And it just seems like the train is rolling and it's not going to stop. I'll say this. If the Celtics want to win the NBA Finals, they got to win both games in Boston and convincingly. They shouldn't have won game 1 against Indiana, to be honest with you. They choked that one. Indiana choked that away. They have to show dominance that, hey, we're the Boston Celtics. We won 64 games. We got all of them. Porzingis is back. We're the best team in the league, and nobody can stop us. I think it'd be very hard-pressed to beat Boston 4 out of 5 times if they were to win the first, 2 games. But if Luka comes in there and steals game 1, I don't think that's something that they can recover from. I just don't think mentally the Celtics, are there. So I think these first 2 games really will decide if we're going to have a series, like a real series, that may go 7 games, or if this Luka and Kyrie train is just rolling and they're just going to steamroll whoever's in front of them.
What would it mean for the Kyrie narrative? The legacy, what he did in Cleveland, obviously going to Boston, having it end the way he did, everything that took place in Brooklyn, the suspension for the Amazon posting and all of that stuff that went down. What would it mean for Kyrie to be able to win this one?
It's a 180. You know what I'm saying? It's going to turn around. Winning does that. People will ignore a lot of things, when you win. And the fact that he would win on a second totally different team without LeBron, after a lot of the people say, you can't win, with Kyrie, he's not reliable, he's not dependable, he's a coach killer, he's a teammate killer. All of that, changes. To me, it's like it's Kobe winning without Shaq. It's, Steph winning without KD. I think when you win these titles after there's a certain narrative about you, people are always going to say something, but I think for him and Luka, because you never want to be the guy that's considered, quote unquote, one of the best players in the league without a ring. I don't think Jokic, in my mind, never has to win again because he got that one.
Yep.
And it validated all the MVPs and all the stuff that people said about. Same thing with Luka. Once you get that one, you're Dirk Nowitzki. You're forever goated.
Yeah.
Now if you want to be, one of the top 5, challenge LeBron, you got to win more. But if you just say, hey, I want to be that guy, you just got to win the one.
We're going to continue the conversation with Robert Littal. We're going to move into boxing. Deontay Wilder, Mike Tyson, Jake Paul, all in the news. We'll get to it next on Sports Wrap. Something to consider coming up in about 10 minutes. Sam Yarnell will parachute in, operative word today, for that conversation. We have a ban in Major League Baseball for sports betting. First it was the NBA this year, and now it is the folks at Major League Baseball. Tucapita Marcano. We barely got to know you. Let's bring back in our friend Robert Littal, Black Sports Online founder, who's hanging out with us for a myriad of topics today on the show, including boxing, which I know is one of your bailiwicks, and obviously what took place with Deontay Wilder this weekend. against Zhilei Zhang, and boy, it was not pretty for Wilder in this fight, and it's got a lot of people asking, have we seen the last of him after he got KO'd by Zhang? What do you think?
I don't. And I tell you why, because boxers hate to retire. Okay, not that I hate to tell sports athletes when they should retire, but I think the consensus is it's been enough. We've seen enough. But boxers hate to retire, especially when you're a boxer like Deontay Wilder. There's people that's willing to give you millions of dollars to fight. So I think we will see him again, maybe against some bums or something like that. But he should retire. I mean, those Fury fights, and we've seen this in boxing history. Sometimes a trilogy like that, it just takes it out of you. And when you're talking about, you don't know why you can't pull the trigger anymore. You don't know why, you can't throw punches anymore. You look a little leery of getting hit. That's normally the sign. But I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up like Roy Jones and keeps fighting, and he may get a win or two here and there. But as soon as he steps up to competition, I think that you're going to see him, flat on his back like you saw against Big Bang Jang.
What was the most surprising aspect of that fight to you?
Nothing really surprised me. I always wonder, like when a fighter says that he can't pull the trigger anymore, but he quote unquote has it back. Is he going to look any different? And you can see in the first round, he just didn't have it. And as soon as he did throw a couple of right hands, that's when he got knocked out. So that's probably not going to help his mental, state as well. I thought, in the heavyweight division, you always have a puncher's chance. And Deontay Wilder he's going to have that punch forever. He'll be a 90-year-old man and still be able to knock out somebody with that right hand. So, there's always some tension there because, what if he lands, the punch? But it's clear it's not the same as it was, 4 or 5 years ago. Call it age, injuries, wear and tear, mental, whatever it is. It happens to all boxers. Father times gives boxers more than they get any other athlete.
Speaking of father time, he's only slightly older than Mike Tyson. We love you, Mike. We are. I really do. And I was rooting for this fight to take place. I wanted to see him get in the ring against Jake Paul and knock him on his you-know-what. But now you've got this fight being postponed. Tyson with an ulcer flare-up, of all the things. It sounds like they're still going to have the fight. It sounds like they still want to have it in Dallas. They're just going to push it back a bit. What did you make of the announcement and sort of where we are with this right now?
Well, I tried to tell you, man, he's old. And he's not old in the sense like, he's like 90 or anything. But when you've been, like we just talked about, when you're a boxer and you've been in wars and things like that, it takes a lot out of you. He's had health issues ever since, he got, out of the ring. And ulcer is that's an old person's, type of thing that's happening right there. There's a lot of money on the line here. Netflix put up a ton of money, for this fight. So they're going to try 100% to get it to the finish line. But, I'm dubious just because he's just not in the greatest, of health. If he was in better health, then, that'd be different. But, if it was George Foreman, maybe that'd be different. But, I worry. Let's put it like that. And I say that as somebody that, like you and I, that wanted to go to the fight just to see how it would turn out.
Yeah, I was anxious to see sort of the spectacle behind it all. And I have to wonder if even the folks at the Texas commission, that basically allowed this to go forward, I got to wonder if even they're watching this from afar now and sort of having washed their hands of it by saying, all right, you can go. I wonder if there's got to be some regret that's sort of creeping in there.
Well, that's the reason that they went to Texas, because Texas is not as stringent of a boxing commission as Las Vegas, New York, or LA. None of those states would have even sanctioned a fight, especially as a professional fight, maybe an exhibition. But if you go to Texas, let's just say, if you know the right people, Jerry Jones obviously was involved, you can get a lot of things, done there in Texas that you couldn't get done in other states.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. So you do think ultimately this fight takes place?
Yeah, I think as long as he gets, medical clearance. I think what they're going to try to do is whenever the doctor said, they're going to try to get in as fast as possible. Like the longer you wait, the harder, it is. But I mean, when you're talking 20, 30, 40, $1 million in your bank account, if you can just get in the ring, that's a hell of a motivation to, maybe keep those ulcers, under control.
I've got 30 seconds here. The next big fight you're looking forward to.
How about Tank Davis fighting Frank Martin in between the NBA finals out there in Vegas? But I'm really looking forward to David Benavidez because he's moving up beyond light heavyweight, to light heavyweight, I should say. Seeing how he looks at his new weight at 175 out there in Vegas, I believe on June the 15th.
Great stuff. Robert Littal, Black Sports Online founder. Check out his work there. He's writing a zillion WNBA articles, and he'll be writing a bunch of NBA stuff out at the NBA Finals in Boston. Thank you, my friend. Have a safe flight. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Have a great one.
We're coming back with more sports wrap, something to consider. Sam Yarnell drops by the show. We're talking about betting in baseball. It's not good. Next. Odds and ends coming up in 10 minutes on this Tuesday edition of Sports Wrap. It is not a good ending for one huge sports star. We'll talk about that. But first, something to consider. We welcome in Sam Yarnell for the first time today, waiting patiently in the virtual green room. Tucupita Marcano. We barely knew you. 149 career games in Major League Baseball for Tucupita Marcano. Lifetime .217 hitter. And that's where it'll end. Because Tucupita Marcano, I just like saying his name. Now I'm kind of regretting the fact that we won't see him anymore. Because I just like saying Tucupita Marcano. Tucupita Marcano banned for life by Major League Baseball for violating its betting on baseball policy. Sam Yarnell. I'm gonna say something that you have said, and I'm gonna try and find a positive out of this. The system's working, right? Because what do a lot of us worry about with sports betting being, as profligate as it is now around the country and being as accessible as it is around the country? Even though California can't get its you-know-what together. I'm going to say that the system is working of reporting of these sports betting companies because Tucupita Marcano was just betting on sports betting sites, and it was flagged, and it was caught, and it shows that the system is working, doesn't it?
Exactly. That was exactly what I was going to say about this whole thing, is that this is a good thing, that this worked out this way. And this is what you want to see if you're a betting regulator or if you're these leagues. This is the way that these kinds of things should happen when somebody breaks the rules. Now, you feel bad for the Marcano kid because he clearly was just at a moment of falter. He had torn his ACL. He was recovering from surgery, and he bet on his own team. I don't know what would ever drive you to do that. But, it's a kid who was a highly touted prospect, had a lot of injury issues, and that ultimately is what is going to end his career, the injury issues leading to the gambling. You hurt for him a little bit. You never want to see anyone's career end over something like this. But, hey, you got to understand the rules and regulations of the place where you work. And if your employer doesn't allow something, you can't do it without getting fired.
It kind of feels a little bit like Calvin Ridley, doesn't it? That's what happened to Calvin Ridley. He got hurt. And in that moment of sort of weakness and desperation and emotional feelings and whatever it might be, he turned to sports betting. And so I think it's kind of interesting because I think there's a parallel here between Ridley and Marcano and the way the two stories played out. And look, for Major League Baseball, I hate to say this, it's the perfect scenario because it's a guy nobody cares about. Sorry, but not sorry. It's a guy nobody cares about, and you just set the example in the modern day of bet on baseball, you're banned for life, or bet on your own team, you're banned for life. I think if you bet on baseball and it's not your own team, it's a 1-year ban, if I'm not mistaken. If you bet on baseball and it's your own team, you're banned for life. I think it's the best possible scenario for Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and like back to the Calvin Ridley thing, right? Like he bet on not his own team. He only received a 1-year ban. He Tucapita Marcano betting on your own team. That's an interesting nuance that I think is frequently lost in all of this. Is there's a large difference between betting on the sport that you play and betting on the team that you play for. All of that said, Jason, I completely agree. I think that, we're starting to see this in sports, but we're starting to see it all caught the right way. So the safety measures are clearly doing their job.
I think it's still, I got to be honest. I think betting on baseball, if you're playing Major League Baseball, I think it should still be a lifetime ban, because there is still the ability from within the sport. All these guys know each other. You have friends that are on other teams. I don't know why it's only a 1-year ban, because you could still influence the outcome of games if you have friends on other teams that are willing to do things. Another topic for another time. Go ahead.
I will just playfully say, I do think, however, you should be allowed to bet on yourself at all points in time. If you want to bet on yourself to hit a home run, then why not? I think that should be the one
Slippery
exception
slope
to all rules. If you want to just bet on nobody but yourself, then hey, that's just a level of cockiness that everyone needs to respect.
It's too slippery of a slope, because if you could bet on yourself for anything, you could bet on yourself for strikeouts and walks, and in this day and age where you can pretty much bet on anything anytime. Coolest thing I saw in sports last night, at least one of them, was this. Rhys Hoskins, for those that didn't see.
And now it's Rhys Hoskins.
Now batting for Milwaukee, number 12, designated hitter, Rhys Hoskins.
Not gonna lie, that was very cool. And the announcer at the very end saying he had goosebumps. Well done by the Bally Sports crew on the Brewers game. We're coming back with odds and ends. Don't go anywhere. Okay, just about time to wrap things up for this Tuesday, but don't worry. We got a lot to jam into this final segment. Don't forget the podcast, available on Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, you name it. We're on all of them. Go and subscribe, just in case you can't watch the show every day. You don't want to DVR it, all that. You can listen to it. You can watch it. Whatever works for you. All right, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Sam Yarnell, the end of the childhood for Miles Russell. You are now stepping into the deep water, my friend. The 15-year-old who was the youngest to qualify at a Corn Ferry event this spring has been given a sponsor's exemption to participate in the Rocket Mortgage Classic coming up in Detroit later on this month. Can he make the cut at a PGA Tour event, Sam Yarnell?
No. As much as everyone wants him to be Tom Kim happens every 20 years. The last time you saw it before that was Tiger Woods. These teenagers don't just automatically, as much as we all want them to, come onto the PGA Tour and compete with actual grown men who can hit the ball 100 yards further than them just because of the size of their bodies. Now, The Rocket Mortgage, right? Signature event. Famously low scores at this event, generally. You have to go very low to make the cut. That just adds another level of pressure for this kid. No, I do not expect him to make the cut. I would bet against him to make the cut, although I'm sure that number will be something outrageous, so there's no point in even touching it. It's a cool story, great for the headlines, and the Rocket Mortgage needs a reason to be relevant every year. Maybe the signature event status should lift it a little bit, but not moving the needle for me.
I gotta tell you, I went and looked and did my homework on this kid. He's blowing people out of the water in the junior ranks. Like, it's not even close. Winning like majors on the junior circuit by like 7 shots. I mean, there's nobody even touching this kid at the youth level right now. And while I'm curious to see how he can compete, distance, all of that stuff, it looks like he's got a lot of swing speed, club head speed, and it doesn't seem like he has any issues in terms of hitting it out there. Kind of tall and lanky for his age. He's going to grow into his body as he continues to sort of mature and develop. I'm looking forward to it. It definitely makes it a must watch for me. The end, sadly, for Novak Djokovic at the French Open. Torn medial meniscus for Djokovic. This isn't just a knee injury. This might be a injury that keeps him out of the rest of the majors. If you think about, a torn meniscus, the time it's going to take to recover, at the very least, it might take him out of Wimbledon, which is the one that, he really values and cherishes the most. Gotta wonder if we see Novak Djokovic in another major this year, and it just sort of continues this narrative that I talked about with Patrick McEnroe on multiple occasions, frequent guest on this show, of creeping over the other side of that hill and starting that slow descent. It doesn't make me happy. It happens to everybody in their careers. We're seeing Rafael Nadal go through it right now, and it seems like that's where we're going with Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, definitely. It is. It's been coming for a while. It's Carlos Alcaraz's time. This is
Jannik Sinner's time, I think.
Yeah, I'm so tired of this Novak Djokovic. And I know he's great and probably the greatest of all time when you talk about majors and stuff like that. But I mean, really, it feels to me almost like, with as many other narratives as we have going on in the tennis world, not only right now, but throughout the time that Novak Djokovic has been dominant, which he truly has, there have been so many other things that have been overlooked, or so many other success stories that haven't been fully taken. Like the Ben Shelton story last year or 2 years ago was not fully appreciated because of the relevancy and the notability of a guy like Novak Djokovic. So as much as it's been great to see greatness for as long as it has, I am very much ready for the narratives to shift to the Jannik Sinners, to the Carlos Alcarazes of the world. That's where tennis needs to head.
Odds and ends, some good news for Kyle Larson. The end of the speculation as to whether or not he will be able to take part in the chase, the playoffs as it would be, for NASCAR. He missed the Coca-Cola 600 because he took part in the Indy 500. Coca-Cola 600 was rain shortened. He got there. He was going to get into the car. He couldn't because the race got called off. He missed the race. It meant he could potentially be kept out of the postseason. It was never going to happen. He is the best in the sport right now. There was no way NASCAR was going to keep Kyle Larson out of its postseason. So,
yeah,
Kyle
great
Larson's
job
in.
by NASCAR of avoiding some really bad press here, because all Kyle Larson did that day was bring a lot of good press to a sport that does not get a ton of good press. And he was the big story on that Memorial Day weekend. So if they would have penalized him for it, it would have been horrible for NASCAR. Thank goodness they made the right decision.
And honestly, it's been a great year for NASCAR. Just stay out of your own way. Don't screw it up. This has been one of the best NASCAR seasons in a long time. Just don't screw it up. Thank you to Robert Littal. Thank you, Sam Yarnell. We'll see you all back here on Wednesday.